Hi there, and welcome to the Call to Cinema. My name is Aaron. I am here with Ry, and I'm gonna pronounce your last name because I'm infamous for getting names wrong.
I'm itching to hear you say it.
I'm gonna go with Levey.
Close. It's Levy, but Levy.
Okay,
Hey, at
it's
least
that easy. I was thinking like Anton and like
get that. So every once in a while, I've heard every iteration of my name at some points. I've had people call me by my last name as my first name, even for like
as a person that's been called Aaron for like almost my entire life, and I
yeah.
understand. Yeah, right. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things tonight about films that he has. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. Let your questions come in. We're going to be looking at at your release that's right out now from ETR Media. That's on the Vinegar Syndrome partner label, and I know there's a lot of Vinegar Syndrome people out there. I know that Maida Zimmer Malcolm in the chat already has and has watched the documentary too. So
Wow,
see
great.
some
Good to hear that.
conversations there. We have two projects that are upcoming that we're going to talk about, and you have a fascinating life. So there's a whole lot. I just look here. I've hyped you up, and you're like, "Oh my god, can I live up to this hype?" You totally can.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say. Yeah, I've been around a long time, actually. I started like when I was 19 in the industry, and my mom was a VHS sales rep in the 1980s for CLR and Video One in Canada. And my stepfather, who raised me, was a pornographer and photographer for exotic dancers and the lovely adult actresses of the world. So I kind of grew up with video, mainstream video on one side, and hardcore triple X pornography that I probably shouldn't have had access to as a child. But I mean,
Yeah,
he had he had 4,000 tapes in the house, and we had like 5,000 screening copies on the other side. So, no shortage of content. If you wanted to learn about film, it's pretty easy to get a film class there.
that would be fascinating. The people that would just come in and out of your door, then from that you'd meet. Uh, Any ones that stood out? Well, I'm sure there's a lot, but
Well, I mean, I mean, I'm a fan of people. I'm a chatty guy. Lived a lot of life, and I had to pack a lot of stuff in. I had to grew up growing up around that scene as well, and being gay, and I mean, I went through a phase where you had sex work, and I did all this stuff. So you pack a lot of life in, at times, and yeah, I met some great people. I mean, I'm really lucky to they always often say don't meet your idols. You meet your idols. Meet them, meet your heroes. And in some cases, you become friends with them. I mean, we were just talking about, how much I loved, the Russ Meyer women, getting to be Tura Satana's publicist and friends with Kit and Natividad, and, and hang out with them and sit around the Coral Sands Motel, which coincidentally now, if you're a fan of like any sort of drag stuff, is the Trixie Motel now. She bought the Coral Sands Motel and renovated it into her own boutique, an updated boutique hotel. Because when I stayed there, they had like the Roy Rogers room, and it was kind of shag carpety and kind of beaten down. And Trixie had to spend a lot of money renovating a whole show renovating the place. And and I've gotten to hang out with some really cool people and befriend some great people and be a publicist for some people that I idolize. It's wonderful, and and get to call some of these people dear friends, and I talk to regularly.
it's amazing. Like just a few people that you mentioned that are like I truly idolize, especially like the Russ Meyer, the repertoire of people that he used in his films. Because there's a guy that, as like Roger Ebert would say, was highly underrated, and he still is to this day, sadly. But growing up as somebody that like totally was enamored with just like getting Natividad, just how kind of cool and badass she was, like as she came across on screen, and it was amazing. It just that kind of blows my mind.
Oh, Tura was the sweetest. I basically fanboyed over her and sent her an email and heard she was coming to Canada for a convention and said, I love you. I think you're amazing. You're a queer icon. I hold most of those women in high esteem. You know, gay men have we love badass women. We love strong, powerful, amazing, campy, you know, strong, powerful women, sexy women. And, you know, we're known for it. And, she had a huge gay fan base and I was part of that. And I just decided to email her and say, hey, I'm coming to Canada. I know you're coming to Canada if you need any help here. And she said, well, actually I could use some help, you know, doing PR and stuff. And so I just went out of my way and became a de facto publicist to her for the last 4 or 5 years off and on.
That's amazing.
By reaching out, you know, because I just, you know, I wanted to be around. I wanted to meet her. I wanted to hang out with her. You know, I did whatever I could. And when the opportunities are there, you take them. And I think that if you have that chance, you know, there's a way to do it. It certainly enriched my life having her in it. You know, I called her Mama T, and, you know, she was great. And I loved hanging out with her. And she was hilarious. I got to introduce her to, she'd never met, if you can believe this, all the years of doing Squeeze Box in San Francisco and Tranny Shack, which was, you know, not obviously not politically correct now, but a very famous party in, you know, in the 90s and that, in San Francisco. Going to these events, she had never met John Cameron Mitchell, believe it or not. And while the convention, the Festival of Fear Fan Expo was going on here, John was DJing because he was doing a book launch, and I took her to the party to meet John. So they finally got to hang out, her, and she'd also never met and Bruce LaBruce had never met her. And so, you know, she got to meet all of these people who she didn't realize how beloved she was in certain circles, because she kind of, you know, she lives her life kind of, you know, in Nevada and had her place there. And she was raising her grandkid, and, you know, she had health issues, you know, because her breasts never stopped growing. So she had a pacemaker. So the pacemaker had to be reset often because she just wasn't, you know, it never really stopped. She was getting, and, you know, and she was getting larger as she got older. So there was that, but she just, you know, she'd kind of lived this kind of different sheltered life. Because what a lot of people didn't really realize is that she had to raise her grandkids in this little house, and, you know, and but she was wonderful, and Kitten was equally wonderful, and you know, I loved, you know, and Raven Delacroix, who I was very, you know, I was close to for a while there, was great. But yeah, they had, you know, something wonderful about being able to hear those stories. They had all lived these crazy lives.
It's weird to see, like, them not realize exactly, like, how much they affect, and especially like certain communities.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because people always try to figure out, you know, why are you so into porn? Why are you into straight porn if you're gay? And I'm like, well, you know, because I looked at adult film as cinema, and so many great auteurs. I mean, you think about, you know, Gary Graver. I mean, here's an adult filmmaker who was Orson Welles' cinematographer, making XXX hardcore movies. You've got Roberta Findlay making brilliant hardcore. I mean, Woman's Torment is a masterwork.
One of my favorites.
Love the Naughty Victorians. I think the Naughty Victorians is fascinating, and that's got a beautiful commentary track on it from Laura Marks, who wrote Alice in Pornoland, which is a look through the sex in the Victorian Gothic era, and her commentary is great on it. And that's such a fascinating film because it's essentially a really kind of Marquis de Sade-esque, because it's actually not a Victorian era film. It's called Naughty Victorians, but it's actually Edwardian, apparently. And I didn't know this until Laura Marks kind of talks about it on the commentary track. But it's got that kind of weird, you know, there's this kind of rapey thing going on, obviously, and it's kind of discomforting. But then there's this whole weird queer rape revenge thing that kind of happens in the movie, and then that just is insanely fascinating. I've had people watch it all the time. I was telling people, these commentary tracks from these amazing women who are able to bring the insight. And then in the porn space, you've got queer and trans academics like Casey Scott, who he's brilliant, and then my friend Liz Purcell, she's great. I mean, and they know this stuff, and they're rescuing and doing these things. I mean, I was telling you how much I've just fallen in love with this beautiful adult film, Blonde Ambition, which is just Casey Scott sent, she said you need to see this, and they did a 35 mil screening in New York, and it's a musical. I mean, it's a 4K UHD restored Busby Berkeley XXX porno musical with like weird bathhouse moments, gay bathhouse moments, and it's like I'm just fascinated by it, and I was just like, this is a joy. I mean, it's just a joy to watch. I mean, it's just like, and again, I've always tried to find love in cinema that was from the outside because I never fit in. And so I was always drawn to those kind of artists. I mean, not that I didn't love my Fellinis and my Bergmans and all of that stuff too. I mean, I love that. But, the sleazier, the dirtier, the grittier, the grimier, the gorier, the better. I mean, I wanted to see everything that I could, because I also just wanted to see stuff that people told me I couldn't watch. It's much more fun to watch stuff that everybody says.
Yeah, I watch that. It's true, and I love that you said that, because that's something that I really press on my channel, that cinema is cinema no matter the genre, and deserves to be studied.
I mean, I have more problems I have more problems with film being boring, and I think if that's a bigger crime, these big, long, bloated, and I know your wife's gonna kill me. You know my opinion on the Lord of the Rings films.
I know.
Me and Mary Warrenoff, my friend Mary Warrenoff, and I both hate them because we find them long, tedious, and boring. And I'm a Peter Jackson fan. Like, I mean, you give me Feeble's Bad Taste and Dead Alive.
Yeah, the classic trilogy.
The Frighteners, the uncut Frighteners is so good. Like, Frighteners is like so not what a studio would normally make. And it's so good. And then he made these movies that I just didn't engage with. And I mean, I read those books as a kid. They're pretty to look at, but to me, it's like paint drying.
See, him is like, that's the thing.
I know she's gonna want my head on a platter for saying that. But at the same time, but then it's just like, things like Titanic, I can't stand. I just find them dull. But
yes,
I find them dull. Whereas, but at the same time, I can watch it happen one night, and I think it's beautiful because it's so rich and silvery, and all that stuff. Anything like that, it was so much great stuff, and but I wanted to I was drawn to things that I was told I wasn't allowed to. My stepfather had a pine hutch table, and in that table was where all of the naughty movies were. So when and I had to learn, I had to time it out on the VHS tape of how far I would turn on the movie, the porno or whatever it was, and I would find that spot in the movie, and I would rewind it back to that spot so I could put it back in the table so I didn't get caught.
I have done that.
And then and he had like 3,000 tapes, right? So stuff like 70s, 80s stuff. Even some things that ended up being illegal because there was a lady named Tracy Lords maybe in some of them.
I liked that stuff, and all of a sudden it was, my...
Oh, God, it was only like one or two legal. I think it was Beverly Hills Copulator and Tracy Takes Tokyo were the only two legal ones. Actually, I think even Copulator might have actually been illegal because New Wave... Because New Wave...
once you did afterwards, Tracy I Love You, I guess, was her...
Tracy I Love You was really the only one that was legal. She was 16 with a fake ID. I mean, but then the same thing happened with Edward Penis Hands, right? With Alexandria Quinn. She was underage. She had to cut out of that. Yeah, it's, so, you spend a lot of time when you're alone, when you're a queer kid, you know, who's kind of odd and effeminate and artsy and geeky and kind of on the spectrum. You know, it's you spend a lot of time reading a lot of books. I mean, and watching a lot of. I grew up in Alberta, so I watched a lot of pro wrestling. That's just why I got to making what I ended up doing with my doc.
You were a Calgary Stampede wrestling person. Yeah.
Back down the hatches, lock the door, Stampede Wrestling at your door.
Yeah, I mean, it could.
Ed Whalen.
I lived in Alberta for
Yeah.
a couple years. Lived in Wetaskiwin and I lived in Camrose, which close to
Yes.
Edmonton. So I know how tough living that area can be sometimes, especially if you're different. Especially, I know I get beat up on a daily basis in that area.
Yeah.
Because I was from Newfoundland. Yeah. But I still love the area. I absolutely adore Alberta.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then that was another thing that made it also really awkward for me. Is that's why I threw myself into film, and in that is my mother. When my father had passed away, when I was very young, I was 4 when my father passed away. My mother had met my stepfather, who was also a blues musician, an R&B soul musician.
Oh wow!
And so he was a pornographer, an R&B soul musician, and he was like a furniture salesman as his day job, really. Before he kind of branched more into the photography kind of other stuff and the gigs. So my mother up and moved my brother and I away from all our family in Oshawa. And so we were out there alone. We had no family, we had no friends, we had nothing. So whereas my brother didn't have the same issues I had. I mean, I was called, sissy and the F word and all of those things and made fun of. So, I instantly regressed into reading books, like voraciously reading and watching any movie I could. And it didn't matter what it was, because with screening copies in the 80s, I don't know if you're familiar with them, they used to come in white boxes only. And it was never, most of them didn't have, they just had a little sticker on it. So you didn't even know what the hell it was. Obviously the bigger studio titles would have artwork on it and things, some like Lethal Weapon came home, you knew what it was. I mean, it's Lethal Weapon. But, when something like the Ladies Club came home, the Rape Revenge movie that, New Line put out, I didn't know what it was. I only knew because some of them would do these teasers, and I think Canon actually produced that too. But Canon would do these like teaser compilations where they do like trailer compilations, and they come home. So you get the trailer tape and you put it in, and you see all about this weird stuff. I remember like with the Chuck. What's the one with Jill Ireland and Chuck and Charles Bronson? God, I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, it was right around the same time that like 52 Pickup came out and all that stuff was coming out there. And I just, these weird movies would come home. And I didn't know what they were. I just took them out of the box and watched them. And Warner was notorious for doing that with their straight to video titles, or their not even straight to video, but drive-in titles or whatever. Just a white box with a name on it. And you'd put it in, and if you lucked out, you found something good, and sometimes you found something great, and and I shouldn't say great in that way, because there's no way that something like Killer Workout is fine cinema. But
in a way, it's great.
But it's great for just the weirdest movie, because. And I remember the promo item for that movie, because that was the other thing with the VHS era is you get these catalogs. My mom would bring home the catalog, the sales catalog that they would have to send to all the stores, and it was like a monthly guide.
I remember those.
All the movies with all the ad slicks in it. But then they'd send all the crap home, that like all the promo crap, and they'd make all these weird stuff. I remember Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. You were given a package of Texas Chainsaw chili mix. It was one of the items that they gave with it. And it was like a package of chili mix. And it was probably just the cheapest chili mix in the world. But it was just a kitschy, goofy. It was brilliant. And then stuff would come home. And I remember the Killer Workout thing came with the promo item was a giant safety pin.
Seriously?
Yeah, like a weapon in the movie, you know. Listen,
Good for Murder Rock, man.
I'm not spoiling anything because believe me, honestly, this isn't Citizen Kane. Okay, this
No.
isn't this is it's a movie. It's an aerobicide serial killer movie with somebody walking around with a giant safety pin, and the safety pin's not like a secret. I mean, you see it in every shot. But
Best
yeah, that was
cartoon.
the shit used to get, and it's just the 80s and 90s for VHS was just such a thing. And it's kind of what drove me there. And then at the same time, wrestling was part of my life too, because Coliseum Video would send home the videos. Coliseum Video probably did the stupidest, WWE and Coliseum Video did the stupidest thing. And probably the most irresponsible thing you could possibly do is there used to be a booklet that showed you how to do wrestling moves. Like, this is how you do the figure 4 leg lock. So of course I'd beat up my little brother and I'd get him in a figure 4 leg lock and I'd try to break his leg. Because or the Boston Crab, they would show you how to do the Boston Crab. So you try to do all this stuff, and it was just like, here's the height of irresponsibility. Let's give kids a booklet on how to injure their younger siblings. Great.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I remember my ex-stepdad and Ella trying to do moves on like one of my uncles. Like they were trying them out and in so much pain. Like realized, oh, this really hurts. This actually hurts.
I see. We know that we remember the booklet.
Yeah.
Like, looking at the booklet. Yeah, that booklet was just so irresponsible. It's just like, who gives kids that? It's like, that's like giving a kid a gun and he's going, here's how you load this.
It is.
But I mean, it was growing up in those spaces and being isolated and kind of taken away from everything. You really, when you're scared, you're alone, you don't want to go out. My brother was popular, he had friends, he was younger than me, but he was a straight A student and I was the weird queer kid who was an actor and and sang and did all these things, and was obsessed with whatever was on radio and on music and stuff. And then wrestling came on TV one day, in addition to watching all these VHS tapes. Watching Calgary Stampede was my introduction to it. And so that led me, when I decided to get off my butt and finally make a film, far too many years late. I should have easily had a film made by the time I was 25 instead of waiting till my mid to late 40s. And being able to want to look at seeing myself in the things that I loved and representation and that importance of it. And one of the Kama Sutra, saw that. Hello. I had a copy of that. I bought one at a flea market. It's great. My mother just about killed me when I bought it, but it's okay. It was fine. It came in handy, actually. It was very popular with the boys in high school. And I wanted to see myself represented in stuff that I loved, and wrestling was something. So when I came time to make a documentary out in the ring, I decided to explore why, the history of representation in an area where my community has been told we're not welcome or we don't exist. And when I started researching the film, I was hard pressed to find out wrestlers. We knew of Pat Patterson, but Pat Patterson, and anybody can say this, Pat Patterson was not actually out publicly. He was out to everybody else, but not in the way that, it was front and center with McMahon. It was to the general public. The general population didn't know about it. They can insinuate and all that stuff. But it was him, and then I slowly but surely would find out about things. And then Darren Young came out, and then I met Sunny Kiss at an indie show. And when I met Sunny, she had at that time had not fully transitioned.
Okay.
And so, but she was in the ring with her then boyfriend, who was an indie wrestler, Killian McMurphy. And so I became friends with Sonny and Killian. And then Pollo Del Mar, the drag queen wrestling manager in the NWA and in GCW, had wrote an article for Huffington Post on Austin Idol and having a crush on Austin Idol. And then went on Austin Idol's podcast with Brian Last. And then I found Pollo. And then somebody sent me an article on Effie. And then I found an article on Pero and Charlie Morgan, and started finding all of these LGBTQ plus wrestlers, and started finding about promotions. And as time went on, the longer things went, and then we had the speaking out movement, which, Me Too, for those not familiar, was like Me Too for wrestling. I had to cut some of my wrestlers out. I had to cut promoter out because he'd been accused of 4 sexual assaults, and he was ripping off queer wrestlers and promoting a show and not paying them. And so it gave me time to stop. And then I was also feeling like I was lacking all of these things. And so for me, I ended up making a doc, out in the ring about the history of queer representation in pro wrestling, something that I had a direct connection to and loved. And I wanted to explore that through a lens that related to me and tell that story. And I'm proud of what we came up with. I mean, people seem to like it. It's won a number of awards, and we've got a really nice Blu-ray. I love the Blu-ray packaging is incredible, and I think ETR has been fantastic. And they really, they were really good to me, and my broadcaster's been great in the US, Fuse TV, and Fuse has been wonderful and an amazing partner. And it's not Netflix, but everybody has the access to seeing it now. And not a lot of filmmakers in this day and age can say that they got a broadcast deal or they got a home entertainment release, because it's not as easy as people think. I mean, I've spent 25 years 30 years off and on as in the distribution space with a company called Mongrel Media. I worked for them briefly in the late 90s when they first launched. I worked for Andre Bennett at Cinema Esperanza. I worked for a guy named Ambrose Roach, a company called Continuities. Bussy, yes, see that, Team Bussy. Yes, I love Effie and Allie so much. And, and I was, and they've done really well, and I've been able to take this movie out, and I've made, I made some of the best friends I've ever had in Sunny Kiss, who I adore. Pollo and I are really close. Susan Tex Green is just a superstar and just a true icon and legend. And I was so glad I could get a legend from the 60s, 70s who knew Pat Patterson, who knew Chris Colt, who knew all of these people, knew Jody Lauer, China, and knew all these people and had worked with them, and was able to offer all of this story, because so few of these people either didn't want to talk, aren't around to talk, or were incapable. In the case of somebody like Pat Patterson, who at that point had written his book with Bertrand Hibert, who's an amazing writer out of Montreal. And he told his story to Bertrand, but he was dealing with dementia and memory loss and Alzheimer's. And also, and that was a really tough one for me, the Pat Patterson story, because, I'll tell you where I stand on this. I vetted Pat Patterson. And if those who are not familiar, and those maybe who are, Pat was accused of sexual impropriety with underage boys and sexually harassing people in the WWF in the 90s. Pat was an easy target because he wasn't out. At the same time, there were 2 other gentlemen, Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin, who we know have, everybody's verified that they were bad news. And Pat was accused by a guy named Murray Hodgson of blackmailing him, basically, saying, if you don't sleep with me, you're gonna lose your job. And Murray Hodgson was fired actually by WWE because he was terrible at his job. And then it turned out in court, and I was able to verify this through Dave Bixenspan, who gave me access to court records, that Murray Hodgson had been a serial blackmailer of closeted gay men.
Yikes.
before he did this. So Pat was thrown under the bus in this. And I'm not saying that Pat was innocent, that he didn't probably hit on somebody and say something inappropriate and that. But everybody I spoke to, and I spoke to 24 people to make sure if I'm going to put this man and hold him up to a lens, here's the story. And there are always going to be allegations against Pat and things that Pat did wrong and Pat said things and Pat did things, but is it any different than some of the other legends that we give a pass to? Flair.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking actually.
You hear stories about Randy Orton doing stuff even, and this is in the 2000s of like, when a guy would go up and shake his hand, he'd pull out his member and put it in their hand. I mean, that's what these goofballs do. I mean, that's what they did. It was a time and a place. I'm not saying it's correct. We just don't do that anymore. So a lot of things we don't do anymore because we just don't do it. We don't own slaves anymore for a reason because it's not right. And I'm not giving, that's not to justify the behavior, but Pat was thrown under the bus. And I wanted to be able to give a timeline history to queer representation pro wrestling from the 1940s all the way to contemporary times today. And people like Effie and Allie Katch that were mentioned, Sonny Kiss and Nyla Rose and Darren Young. And so there's a whole, I like a real linear chronology of kind of events and how we get from point A to point B. I don't, not that I dislike other styles of documentary. That's the kind of practice and kind of way that I work with. It's much easier for me to write a linear, point A, 3-act structure kind of thing. And it's not even the style of documentary that that are my favorite types. So, and that's where we get out in the ring. I mean, and I've been very lucky to see crossover. And I will also say that my favorite review was a Reddit review that basically said I was making a film from the perspective of a pervert. So one of these lovely homophobic, hateful movies. It's my favorite review ever.
I love those.
Ridiculous. The guy just goes in on me, and I love it. It's just like, he says like he insinuated this, and I'm like, which I didn't. None of the stuff he said was true. He accused me of a lot of stuff, but it was so funny. But when I got to the line, I was like, this filmmaker is clearly making a movie from the perspective of a pervert. And I was like, I've achieved what I want. I've achieved
on your hate
in life. I guess I just like all the great perverts that I admire who made porno and Russ Meyer and Bruce LaBruce and John Waters. Great. I've ascended as a proud pervert in cinema, perverted filmmaker. I will take it. And even though the movie is like not the least bit perverted, I mean, the only people who are saying that are homophobic, closed-minded people. But hey, and I totally expect that those people are not going to like the film. But again, telling stories about people where they don't have a space is where I want to be seen, and I want to address some of those things within it. Some things are much more overtly gay and queer in terms of the stories I'm telling. I'm going from gay wrestlers now, and I'm editing a doc on gay Christian music artists. I'm not the least bit religious, but I'm fascinated by the rights of somebody to be in a space where they've been told they're not welcome. And I think you should have the right to live your life. And I even do it in boutique. We'll talk about that more.
I was going to say, like, I guess it's maybe not meant for those type of people, but in a way, I think it really is meant for those type of people. If it can, even if they kind of hate on it a bit, they watched it. So hopefully
they went out of their way.
Yeah.
They went out of their way to watch it. And yes, Orlando Jordan was a wrestler who came out. And he lives in Australia now, but we really don't talk to him. He's a little persona non grata. But I do cover him in the film. He's in there briefly because he had a very bad, we cover a lot of really bad angles in pro wrestling and a lot of homophobia and like really inappropriate, really inappropriate representation. And he had a particularly dubious one in. They lower him from the ceiling in caution tape between a twink and a hot girl, with the male and the female gender symbols, and
I
he
remember
basically is insinuating that he was bisexual and fluid and polyamorous and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's but it's that I was fascinated by the representation, and
I
I'm
was I
proud of,
was a massive Canyon fan. Like I'm a massive Chris Canyon fan. I think he's like one of the most criminally underrated, talented wrestlers.
intensely underrated talent, and I mean, he got treated really badly. A lot of people, Ric Flair kind of hung him out to dry on the Howard Stern show and said he wasn't good enough to be in WWE. That's why he got fired. But Rick had no problem hiring him and having him train his son David. When David needed wrestling training. I mean, didn't help that David sucked, but Chris tried his damnedest. Chris tried his damnedest to turn that boy into something, because his daddy couldn't do it, or his daddy didn't want to. But I just and that's kind of where I'm kind of looking at spaces where can I tell my story? Where can I talk about things that are of interest to my community? Where can I be helpful and also shine a light on maybe some other issues as well? I mean, I'm an activist. I'm pro-sex work. I'm queer. I guess I'm a feminist as well. I mean, I certainly that, but I'm also pro-sex work. And one of the things I wanted to do, even with Boutique, which again, another area, I'm coming back to areas where I love, I'm a collector of physical media. I grew up around physical media. I grew up around cinephiles and cinephilia and all writing and academics. And so with this new documentary, it's called Boutique, to Preserve and Collect. I look at the history of physical media. We talk about the advent of cinema, go through the VHS era. We stop and take some moments to talk about the RCA video discs. We talk about Laserdisc. We talk about going from laser to DVD, and then how these new Blu-ray labels are actually helping to rescue, preserve, and restore films. So I interviewed Joe Rubin from Vinegar Syndrome and David Gregory from Severin. And then I talked to some of the other partner label people. I talked to somebody like, again, I get to kind of discuss some of the LGBTQ plus stuff that is part of who I am. It comes back to, and I get to spoke to my lovely friend Frank Jaffe, who runs Altered Innocence, which is easily one of the strongest partner labels, was one of the strongest partner labels at OCN and Vinegar Syndrome, and responsible for so much classic cinema being restored. And Vinegar Syndrome, to their credit, has been so far ahead of the game in terms of introducing non-LGBTQ audiences to LGBTQ cinema. I mean, you think of the Wakefield Pool films, which are gorgeous pieces of cinema. Buddies, which is a masterpiece of
Punch Man.
a heartbreaking film. But without Buddy's success, Frank Jaffe would never have released Forbidden Letters or Gay USA, all of these Arthur Bresson docs that chronicle the 70s and 80s queer history, and restoring films like The Strangler and talking Arabato, which is such a cool, weird film. And I wanted to talk to these labels about, and I wasn't interested in interviewing Guillermo del Toro, and I love del Toro, and I know that he's big on physical media and it's wonderful, but I didn't need Seeds. Yes, we love Seeds. Yes, Andy Milligan. And we wanted to, I wanted to talk to people whose films had actually been lost or were at risk of being lost. So instead of being the quote unquote star screwer documentary, celebrity interviews, lots of them. I picked and chose directors that I was fascinated by the work. I was familiar with them. And, again, I will fully say I have a bit of an agenda, and the agenda is to elevate visibility for who I haven't seen there. So when I get to interview, so I interviewed in Boutique, and it's out there who's in it. I interviewed Lizzie Borden, and I
Oh, nice.
love Lizzie Borden, and I fought so hard to interview her. I had to convince her and basically fawn to a point where she goes, well, now I feel guilty if I say no. Which is exactly what she said to me. And then we had a really great interview, and then she was totally comfortable because I think she was worried that I was just going to ask a bunch of stupid questions. And I wanted to talk about restoration. I wanted to talk about Criterion doing this gorgeous transfer and restoration of Working Girls, which is a masterpiece. And talk about, the UCLA, the work that the UCLA Film Archive did there, and the work that Anthology Film Archives did in restoring Born in Flames, which is going to hopefully this year see a Blu-ray finally on Criterion. It
Nice.
looks Janice has it. I interviewed John Huckert, the director of The Passing. What an interesting journey for that weird little movie. I mean, the stuff he told me about the film. Again, a film that at one point, the short film, I don't want to give too much away. I mean, it's not in that film, but it's the short film version of that was what he made to eventually make The Passing. He had one negative. He hadn't even struck a print. He had the wet neg, and he'd met Spielberg on the set of Batteries Not Included, and he arranged for Spielberg to have the negative sent to Spielberg's house in 86, 87. Off the set of Batteries Not Included. And this poor guy had seen so many problems like this. Like his storage facility flooded, with the negative for the feature and the print things. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? He sends the negative for this 30-minute short that he expanded to the feature, brand new, gorgeous, to Spielberg to watch it at his home theater. Spielberg had a fire at his home. That negative burned up in said fire. It happened to be the weekend that he had just printed over. So this poor guy couldn't, it had every problem. And for Joe Rubin to help piece that film back together from his many existing elements, which is where I love what Joe Rubin and Ryan Emerson do at Vinegar Syndrome, and that adorable Oscar Bacher, who I just think is just the funniest, driest, coolest guy. Passing does rule, Maddie. Yes. And I interviewed Huckert, and then I interviewed Brian Damute about Sudden Fury, and we talked about the Sudden Fury restoration. I interviewed David Blythe, who you were just recently talking about on your channel, Dead Made Death Warmed Up, another film that got on fire. The negative was burned in the New Zealand Film Archives. Somebody went down to the lab and was cleaning up there and set the storage facility on fire. The New Zealand film. So the negative for that film burnt up. And David's become one of my best friends in the world. I talked to Dave. I was talking to him last night. And he's a wonderful man. I mean, but he's seen a resurgence in interest in his work. This is the man who made the first New Zealand gore film.
Yeah.
Warmed Up.
The very first splatter, splatter was amazing.
Peter Jackson, Hodorowski gave him his first award for that film. He was on the jury at the festival he won for in Paris. And then something like Grampire, or My Grandpa's a Vampire, has been released. That's got a restoration now. So now he's got all these new fans who are rediscovering this work of this filmmaker. And he's got this whole canon of other work that's out there that can't be released because it's stuck with a sales agent and the producer doesn't want to sell the film. The Red-Blooded American Girl films, Red-Blooded American Girl and Hot Blooded, which is the sequel to Red-Blooded American Girl. And you can't release it because the producers won't sell the rights. He's got Angel Nine, which is his first feature he made before that. He made all these beautiful fetish documentaries, Bound for Pleasure. And he's just this really interesting, prolific. That yes. So somebody just asked about the saving. Yes. So I don't want to say too much about it because he tells the story in the film. Yes. So, but in both cases, the passing and death warmed up, they were restored from as many different prints as they could find from around the world because there was no negative specifically for death warmed up. So they had to find all those elements.
There's actually another one of his films as a bonus as a bonus disc on Death Warmed Up, actually.
Or as you called it, wound. We laughed about that.
I was wondering what the comment was for.
Wound. It's like a visceral punch in the gut. It's gross. It's bloody. It's weird. It's psychosexual, strange movie. I love Wound. It's so nasty and vicious. It's so glad it's on that French release because it deserves an audience. It's just nasty, just raw, nasty stuff, and just a gut punch. And it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. I mean, it's almost. Although I was talking today. When I was at the Vinegar Syndrome store. I was kind of like film geeking out and trying to sell movies for Andrew and the boys at the store here in Toronto. And we were talking about the most nihilistic film. And Joe Rubin and I talked about it. Is Good Luck Miss Wickoff, which is the nastiest, most angry, misogynist, weird movie. Like, it's so bizarre, but I love Good Luck Miss Wickoff, which is again like the epitome of like depressing. It's like the darkest Fassbinder-y kind of weird hate.
It is really very Fassbinder.
It's a nasty, nasty piece of business. It's just so bleak and dark, but so good. So good, It's, we were talking about, that era of the 70s, this is the films that I wanted to discover in Boutique and talk about. Those films that could be lost to time. Those films that be there. Films like Candy Snatchers and Best Friends and Good Luck Miss Wickoff and The Telephone Book. I mean, so good. And again, films that nobody bought. Like, you think about how long, Aaron, The Telephone Book sat there with a slipcover.
I know.
He gave it a shot. And then people saw it and go, where has this been all my life? Where has it been? And I'm so glad that Joe and those guys did that, and the stuff they're doing today now, yes, I know everybody's not happy that, Navy SEALs and stuff like that is coming out and it's too mainstream and I want you to focus it. Well, guess what? Those guys got to make a living and they got to pay for that. And it's not that Joe is a fan of restoration and preservation. And I went through the archive. I went down to Bridgeport. I went through the lab. I saw all the whole facilities. I watched them cleaning up a print, the Strip Pics porno print. They had that there. They were working off the neg. They were doing all the work on it. The stuff that those guys are doing, if they don't release a rad or a mainstream movie, how the hell do you think they're going to find the money to restore something like Revenge?
Yeah.
Or, all of these obscurities that they're doing. I mean, it's not that, listen, do you think Joe, I can tell you that Joe's not sitting at home at night. I mean, he told me he doesn't like Rad. It's not his type of movie. I love Rad because it was my brother and I's favorite movie as a kid. And we watched it. We had a screening copy. My mom brought the screener home. And we watched that thing like till it broke. And we taped it back together. And it was, we just watched it every day. So waiting for that. And that's one of the other great pleasures of my life, was my brother was just like fanboying out on it too. My brother's so obsessed with the movie, named his kid Crew. Come on. I mean, I interviewed Bill Allen. I went to interview Bill Allen about the Rad phenomenon because I was so fascinated by what happened with that release because it broke Vinegar Syndrome. It took them over. It proved that they could take something a lot more mainstream. Now, listen, I totally get that people aren't going to like Rad. And I know why those who don't like it. It's not their type of movie. I get it. It's a mainstream BMX action movie with a rah message, in it. You know, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not Telephone Book. It's not, you know, any, you know, it's not Fatal Games. It's not any of these, you know, it's not Slaughterhouse. I know you love those things. I love those films too. I grew up watching them. But without these mainstream things, I just want everybody to realize this, and I'm going to defend these labels. They're not putting this out because, oh yeah, they suck now. They're too mainstream. No, because they can't pay for a restoration if they don't have money. And they only make money by selling a bunch of copies of Showgirls. And guess what? You know, Showgirls sold out for them. And guess what? Here's why you've got Fatal Games coming out. Here's why you've got this movie coming out next week. This weird Mexican horror film, those Taboada films, or Demon Rat, or Boggy Creek. Only reason you're getting those is because they put out the mainstream stuff. So they're doing that to finance their ability to save what they love. And that's where these guys, that's where the heroes come into this, right? That's where you become these restoration people. David Gregory saving and protecting, something, telling me, what he's, House on Straw Hill, and going out to, how he had to save that thing, and it was sitting in a barn full of like bird shit covered in it. And
that's a favorite of mine, actually. That movie's a favorite of mine.
That took him 15 years. When David and I, it took him about 10 years. When we talked at Fantastic Fest in Austin, when he was there, we were all together. We were there. It was when Jess Franco and Lena Romay had come to Fantastic Fest. We were all hanging out together, and I was with Jess and Hess.
I'm so jealous.
I was with Jess, David Hess, Lena Romay, David Gregory, and David at that point had just found stuff, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to clean that movie up because it was in such bad shape. I mean, when that happened in 2009, the technology was not there to restore it properly. You weren't able to take the emulsion, because you have to soak these things, right? Because some of these prints are in like buckets. In some of the Filipino films, they said they've been saving. One of them was like submerged in water. They somehow managed to fix it. I don't know. See, this is the shit where we really get it. It's cool that they're doing this, but that's why they do the mainstream stuff, so that I can get all that other interesting stuff. I'm not going to get.
There's no Navy SEALs. You don't get any of the Mexican horror boxes or the
Hong
Kong, stuff like that.
You get homegrown horrors, I mean, because do you think they make a ton of money putting out a movie like that for the cost that it costs to restore a Fatal? Listen, the cost to restore Fatal Games is the same cost as it would be to restore Showgirls. The price of restoration does not change because one movie's shittier than the other, or lesser known than the other, or more weird or obscure. I mean, but without that other stuff. So that's how they're doing it. I mean, Joe says he'll outright say his passion is restoration and preservation, and releasing Blu-rays is a means to an end to make sure and ensure that these films are saved. He's a collector of prints. That's what he does. He's a collector of negatives. That's what he wants. He's a restorationist first and foremost, and an archivist. And that's what I wanted to do with Boutique. And then also elevate women in the space. I interviewed Sam Deegan, who I love. Sam Deegan.
Sam Deegan.
Great. And I get to talk about my friend Kayla Janice. I get to fanboy over my friend Kayla. And I get to hang out with Sam, who I just love. And then there's this other wonderful writer who I hope starts getting into the space with them. And she's this great superstar named Tori Potenza. And she's just this fantastic, writes all this beautiful stuff on Cronenberg and body horror and stuff. And she's just this fascinating woman and collector. Like, loves being is a huge collector and gets it and loves it, and being able to talk to them, that excited me more than, going out and trying to find some famous director, and talk to them. I want to talk to the ones who almost lost it all. I want to talk to people who've been told that they didn't have a right to talk about cinema. Women, how many times have we heard that women shouldn't be talking? Women are told to be quiet, stay in the kitchen, and they shouldn't like sex films. That's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's bullshit. I mean, the commentary track on Malabimba alone, those three amazing women breaking down that weird Italian porno exorcist ripoff, which is great, by the way. It is a great film. But with that commentary track of the two of them, or Let My Puppets Come, Sam and breaking the commentary down on a puppet porno musical made by the guy who made Deep Throat, and then done by like the guys from the Henson people, you know, and Annie Sprinkles in it, and you know, it's just like, yes, and I love Kayla so much. Kayla and I have known each other a long time now, 20 years. Yeah, but 25 years now. Jeez.
I remember the documentary on her. I remember watching that.
Yeah, the one that Ashley made. Yeah, Cellular Horror. You know, and I love Kayla. I mean, she's the hardest working woman I know. I mean, look at that box work. Look at that work she did on the Emmanuel. Jesus Christ, that Emmanuel box. Isn't that just like the most beautiful thing ever?
It's amazing. The Emmanuel Bible, when you take it out and you're like,
oh, I know everything about it. You know, it's like everything she's done. You know, houses. I'm looking at my hobby of House of Psychotic Women here. I think I got 3 different copies of it because I have to have every version because it's just so damn good. And then, you know, and then I've got, you know, the House of Psychotic Woman box set, and, you know, and just how important these women are, you know, Cat and you know, even the men too, you know, the people like Stephen Thrower, we would talk about him a bit, you know, we talk about how they decide how they hire these people to be their experts. And I don't even get to talk about great people like Elizabeth Purcell enough, and I love her and she's great. I mean, you know, Casey Scott, you know, and Daniel Clemmer, who's doing all these, who did this beautiful, was part of that beautiful box set on Irwin Winkler films that's out. I mean, there's so much cool shit. I mean, this is the renaissance of collecting now because we realize the streamers don't care. How many of these films are already lost that have debuted on streamers?
True.
They're gone off Netflix. And those are Netflix originals. There is no physical release coming for Killers of the Flower Moon in North America.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? That's why we need physical. That's why boutique. That's why I did boutique. I did it because I loved it. I did it because I knew that there was a base for it. And that's why that's why everybody is so flummoxed that Best Buy and all of these spaces are getting rid of their Blu-rays and they're getting rid of their DVDs when we're at a time right now when more and more people are buying physical media than they ever have. I was in the Vinegar Syndrome store today. There were 20 people in that store buying today. Oh yes, I gotta buy that.
Yeah.
God, Taboo. Oh God, yeah. And then Mark Caden just put out a book on trans representation in horror in genre cinema, in film and cinema, which is a great book too. Which I'm really for. So there's so many great books. Sweetest Taboo about child killers, which is so great. And just the idea there. I'm looking at my copy. I've got my copy of Antichristo and the history of nasty nun cinema up here, which is which is sandwiched between. So my bookshelf now has Antichristo, the history of nasty nun cinema, and sandwiched in between and above that is Behind the Pink Curtain, Jasper Sharp's book on Japanese pink films. And then I just realized that for some reason, and I didn't even do this on purpose, the Encyclopedia of Contemporary Christian Music is sandwiched between those two books on the shelf.
Which we're going to talk about in a minute, actually. For those that haven't seen this link down below, if you want to see this documentary, which I really do, you can actually help this documentary get out there.
Because, I mean, we still have a fundraising link up. If you're from the United States, even, and you donate, you can actually get a tax receipt for it because that's a fiscal sponsor page. That's not like a standard crowdfunding page. We had a regular crowdfunding that we did where we raised some small amount of money, which we also did. My production company, when I made Out in the Ring, I had to do it pretty much alone. I had my great editor and dear friend Brad Webb worked with me for like 3 years during the pandemic. I'm so glad I got him when I did. But Brad is a professional trailer editor. He cuts Super Bowl commercials, and he did all this stuff for Napoleon. He does all these big. So I lose him. I got to use him a lot during the pandemic. Cut to my new editor, James Carson, who's a brilliant classical pianist and filmmaker in his own right, made a beautiful film called Cabin Music. And he's a cinematographer, and he's just this amazing Renaissance man. And he likes to work fast, which is a new experience for me, because editors like to let things breathe and take time. He likes to get it done. He doesn't like to wait. So he works 18-hour days. We cut Boutique in a month.
Oh, wow. Are you serious?
We cut Boutique in a month. He basically cut it down. So he would send me 3-minute segments every day, 3 to 5 minute segments, and I go through it. And I gave him the paper edit. I wrote the screenplay. I basically wrote the story on how the doc should roll out. We decided on what clips to use. We decided on what films we wanted to focus on. I decided my goal was to talk about, boutique labels and their role in film preservation, restoration, and elevation of lost, marginalized, and forgotten cinema. Not the mainstream stuff. I know why it's there, but I wanted to talk about why they're so important as restorationists and preservationists, which is why it's called Boutique to Preserve and Collect. Everybody who buys and owns a collection of Blu-rays is a preservationist, because you now have a piece of history there. If that ever goes missing, if somebody can't find the film, or for some reason the negative goes missing, and we hear about it all the time, about things going missing, and this is what's happening with this. This is where the streamers, because, oh, but everything's on streaming now. Yes, everything's on streaming, but then when they take it off, it never gets seen again. It goes into a vault. I mean, you think about all of that stuff that's coming out through Fun City Editions.
If you're lucky. Look at Zaslav and Warner Brothers, the stuff that they're destroying.
The CBC, well, I mean, Canada, worse. I mean, look at the CBC archives digitizing film prints and then throwing them out. Public library systems taking 16 millimeter film prints and throwing them in the bin and spinning them off the reels, putting them in the bins behind the school, but behind their libraries, and recycling the metal. I rescued a Norman McLaren collection on 16 years ago. I rescued Pour la Suite du Monde on 16 mil. I rescued, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leonard Cohen.
I love that.
I rescued these prints because I knew what they were too, and I had a whole bunch of these prints in my basement. And luckily, my dear friend Phil Spurrell, who's a filmmaker and has worked for the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal for years, drove up from Montreal to take all of my prints out of my mother's basement when I was moving, as I didn't have anywhere to take them. I would have loved to have given them. I gave him everything, and he's keeping those safe. The idea that the Norman McLaren films, those prints of Blankety Blank and Neighbors that I had, Chris Alexander's in my film. Chris Alexander from Fangoria, who I love, is a hardcore 16 mil film collector. He's got a lot of Kayla's prints now. He inherited a lot of Kayla's collection, and he's always buying prints. Again, these are the people doing the work. And then the people like Joe and David Gregory and Ryan Emerson and Oscar and UCLA Film Archive and Anthology Film Archives of these restorationists who are doing it. They're doing, is quote unquote what Chris calls God's work, whatever that is. But, by saving and rescuing these films. And that's, where I came with Boutique,
I mean, Gregory too is such a massive video nasties guy. He wants to save all the video nasties. It's so weird. I mean, so many films do get Heath, Serial Midnight. I remember him doing an article on his on the website about Abominable and how that's not an old movie, and it was almost completely lost. When the director went to look for it, nobody could find it. And when they found it, it was not in great condition. And it is so amazing that we live the time now where I think we're growing up a whole generation of cinephiles like we've never had before because of boutique labels, because of this.
Absolutely. And I mean, and there's something else, it's not just film that's 35 and 16. You think the SOV stuff, I mean, how much of that SOV stuff in the 90s was going to die?
Yeah.
All that Saturn's core stuff. I interviewed my friend Scooter McRae in the film in Boutique. And Scooter, they redid Shatter Dead. Scooter is the best it's ever going to look. And nine tongues and stuff like that. I mean, Scooter knows what he made. He made straight SOV stuff. He made a gory SOV movie, and there's all this stuff. But that deserves to be seen, deserves to be preserved. It's cinema history, whether you like it or not. I don't own a lot of that Saturn's core stuff because I think most of that stuff is garbage. It's not the thing. But for some people, they love SOV stuff. Like there are people who love that 80s, 90s SOV. And, like I don't have it, listen, I'm sure Tina Kraus is a wonderful woman. I have no interest. I don't like Limbo. It's not my film. I bought Shatter Dead because Scooter's my buddy. He's my brother. Scooter's actually the composer on Out in the Ring. He created the score for me for free that guy's a mensch. But he's also a hardcore film collector. Hardcore, and not just hardcore, but hardcore. He collects a lot of hardcore films too because he's a big pornography fan. But I interview him in the film, and you see, I get and I get it. People love Tina Kraus, and it's not my thing, but I believe that work needs to exist. I'm not a huge Neil Breen fan either, but Neil Breen movies should be saved in that. I'm not I think The Room is awful. I can't watch it. I don't get it, but I know people who just are obsessed over that movie, and I love it. And I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it's there.
We're Canadian. 1989's Things, right? 1989's Things.
Yeah. just personally, but again, I'd much rather watch something that's made with passion. Birdemic. I mean, that's Psychopath.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. That's...
I'm that's Psychopath. I mean, he is a psychopath because I know James Wynn. I worked on the release of Birdemic. I had to go and that guy believes he thinks he's Hitchcock. He legitimately believes he's Hitchcock. He thinks that movie is a masterpiece of modern cinema. He's a Silicon Valley tech guy with a lot of money and too much time on his hands.
Well, I'm sure it's with Venus too, right? Like he feels that every film he has is like
a film for that reason, and it becomes more fascinating once you meet this human being. That's why The Room is so fascinating, because Wiseau is fascinating. I think Wiseau is far more interesting than The Room is. And
oh my God.
The Room is just you can't sit home and watch The Room on your own and just think, it does not work. It's not.
It's a group film.
It's as bad as any Skinamax movie that was ever on in the 90s. I mean, and it's just the bizarre non sequiturs. It's just like, what's the one? Oh, Champagne of Bullets. Oh God. Fascinating, arrogant prick that guy is, eh? Like, I mean, I love this stuff, but I want to hear their stories. I almost feel like the need to analyze that brain and how you get there.
I love that Hauser, no matter what he's in, just like A game. Hauser is always like Hauser just
Hauser would show up to the opening of an envelope at a Klan rally, I think. I honestly believe that. He's just so desperate for a check. But it's just bizarre. I mean, and I'm, and again, I'm reading here, Kruger Glover saying, Champagne of Bullets, right? Yeah. Couldn't get into it. I totally understand that. I totally understand it because it is a bloody train wreck, but it is a fascinating one. It is fascinating to me. But again, I'd much rather look at that and be fascinated. Like, how did you get from this to this? And I want to find out what that journey is, because that journey is interesting to me. More so than the film on its own. You know, I mean, in many cases,
It's he's not leading man material. Well, no, he's not. He's definitely not leading man material. William Smith and like Wings Hauser in this movie,
he's
and
about as
he's the lead.
sexy as a school bus fire. That man, sexy as a school bus fire. And you know, honestly, it's just like there's nothing to that. I have to show something now because it's sitting here. This was gifted to me by these wonderful Finnish filmmakers I worked on and made a beautiful documentary called Homecoming. This is Tom of Finland Vodka, and I don't know if anybody can see it because it seems to be blurring.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Stuff. So anyway, yeah, crazy stuff. Oh, all right, just was staring at my face. You know, so I've got I have a plethora of stupid shit in my apartment and books and movies and everything that I loved. You know, it brings me joy, and that's why I wanted to make Boutique. You know, it was a love letter to what I love.
What I find also fascinating is you're working on another one right now.
Yeah.
Man.
We're writing the paper edit as we speak. And I'm actually in the middle of the documentary film festival. Hot Docs is on right now. And so tomorrow is like industry days for 4 days. It's just me and meetings trying to find money and sell movies and find a sales agent, doing all that stuff. This is a new one called Song Silenced, coming out in Christian music. And it looks at the history of queer representation in the Christian music industry. That goes back to the 1960s, and we talk about those who were in the closet, who were secret, and then those who were million record selling artists in some cases, who were very popular in contemporary Christian music, who came out of the closet and lost their careers, had to restart over, had their songs torn out of hymn books, not played on radio, lost everything. They lost everything. They lost to their music. They did everything. And there's all of these stories of these people. And cut to today, where now we have Reconstructionists in the religious space and contemporary queer Christian music artists like drag queen Flamey Grant. Semler is a gender nonconforming Christian music artist who was the child of an A&R man for Christian music artists. And so part of our journey is to watch how they're fighting back to find a way to be able to live their truth, whether you believe or not. That has nothing to do with this. Everybody should have the right to live the life that they want to live, truthfully, honestly, and happily. And
what fascinates me is something that I didn't know existed. Like putting those two things together was not. Never would have like.
This sometimes will come out of something bizarre, like weird. This idea came because I had a short film I made about my friend's love story called Closest Thing to Heaven in 2013 that I made. And I went to the Philadelphia Film Festival, Philadelphia Gay Lesbian Film Festival. And there's a film there called The New Black, which was a documentary that explored how the Republicans were pitting the Black church against the gay community, the Black community and the gay community. And they were doing it to try and divide them because they were playing off of the homophobia in the Black church, and they were playing off the racism in the queer community, and they were using it against each other. But in the middle of that movie was a clip of an out Christian music artist named Tone, R&B soul artist, and he went on an interview show, one of these Christian interview shows that they have and talk show, and the woman went on and asked him about his sex life, about what kind of sex he liked, what all of these really offensive things.
Yeah,
it was bizarre, and he said, "I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my new album." And it so scarred him. This is a man who sold millions of records. He's now a major producer for people like Chaka Khan and Patti LaBelle and other, and legendary gospel artists in the space like Shirley Caesar and, all of these icons. And he walked away from his entire Christian music career, changed his name, and never looked back. He had to give up his career. Marcia Stevens is a woman who wrote a song called For Those Tears I Died, which was like one of the most popular songs sung in the church. And she was part of the first Christian music supergroup in the 70s. She came out in 1980. They tore that song out of books. They stopped playing her music. She went on to found a lesbian ministry called Born Again Lesbian Ministries, Balm, and was and she eventually would be a mentor to other artists, a million reconciling artist named Ray Boltz, who came out in the 90s, who was a staple if you were like up at 2 a.m. and when they were hawking all those Christian compilation albums, right? And
I
you see
remember that.
Ray Boltz, a song called "Thank You" for giving to the Lord or whatever. And he came out married with 4 kids, and we tell his story, and we talk about all these other artists. But then alongside that, I also talk about music directors who came out as trans, who lost their jobs and were kicked out of their churches and had to find a new way to start over. And then these new artists are using, because the radio industry in contemporary Christian music is controlled by the Gospel Music Association, and they control these radio stations, and you don't get played on there if you're gay. You don't get played on there if they don't want you on there. And they basically exile you, and they burn your career. They bury your music. And in some cases, these labels own all of the music, and they own 100% of the publishing and performance rights on that music. It never gets played again. And they all they do is they profit off it wherever they can, but they basically go out of their way to bury it. What has happened is the reconstructionists in the space who are out, like Flamey Grant, this wonderful drag queen, singer-songwriter, grew up in a very conservative religious family, identifies as non-binary, and this other artist, Semler, who's gender non-conforming, grew up again in the faith-based music industry. Both of them went #1 on the iTunes Contemporary Christian Music charts, which angers the evangelicals and the Gospel Music Association, because they can't control that, because that's not radio.
Yeah.
And when Flamey Grant was attacked by a set of artists, by a MAGA preacher, one of the guys who was doing all the thank you so much, it's so nice, thank you for donating, I really appreciate that. It's we're really happy and excited to get this out there, and we're editing it right now. It'll be out this fall. What happened was she fought back online and said, let's show this guy that he's wrong, that people do care about me, that people care, that being seen for kids in conservative religious families need to see somebody who looks like them, even if their family tells them it's wrong. Yeah. And the reason they do that is by saying that and speaking up. She went online and she said, let's prove them wrong. And within 24 hours, she had the #1 album and #1 single on the iTunes Contemporary Christian Music charts. And there were features in Rolling Stone, People Magazine, and everything about her. So it backfired because their hate. She was able to spin their hate. Same thing with Semler, did the same thing. Spun it. Then we actually did something really special. Flamey and Semler decided that they wanted to celebrate their contributions and their religious beliefs and their belief in Christian music. And they wanted to go to the Christian Music Awards in Nashville, the Dove Awards. And the Dove Awards are, they're the Grammys for Christian music. But Semler and Flamey will never be nominated. But they had very successful years last year. They had #1 songs, #1 albums on the iTunes charts. Now, it's not the GMA. It means they're not going to get nominated, but they should have every right to celebrate there and go. And it wasn't a protest. It was about being present and being part of it. You should have the right. So the Dove Awards sell tickets to their awards ceremony. And Flamey put out a call to arms. And I went with my amazing non-binary camera person, Hunter Pendleton, wonderful young cinematographer. They are incredible. And we went and we followed Flamey, who went full drag, and Semler, and a lot of her band who are gender non-conforming and non-binary, who often present in different clothing and different looks. When Flamey put out the call, 30 people from across North America flew in for the awards, and it was 35 of us that went to the awards, and we walked the carpet in drag, and we walked past those people. And they had to see us. What we didn't know was happening was online on the social media, on their Instagram for the Doves and that, the evangelical ultra right went crazy. They were all there, and they were like, I can't believe they invited a drag queen to the award show, because obviously, thought and, rational thought and reason, reason is not something that is often utilized in that space. They had no idea that they forgot that you can buy tickets. So we did nothing more than buy tickets, like everybody else who bought tickets and sat up in the nosebleeds. And we had a party after, and we went, and they got to celebrate, and we got to experience this kind of weird celebration that turned into almost a white nationalist Christian rally at one point that switched tone wide. And it was weird. It was a mix of division and racism, and you don't see it initially, and then you're in it, and it's horrifying, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's terrifying. And I'm so glad that we were there with cameras, and we were able to document what happened and watch the positive responses, but the negative, to the point where every time they turn around, they're yelling at Flamey Grant. There's a pastor who goes nuts, and he's one of these guys who wants to kill people for being gay. He's advocated for the murder and eradication of LGBTQ people. And we were able to document that and talk about how we've gone from, this hidden history to those who were brave enough to come out and lost it all, to today those who are out because of the bravery that those people made, and how they're reconstructing how one accesses their belief system and live in their truth.
That's utterly fascinating.
And
yeah,
and I'm interested in those histories. I mean, I'm interested in covering where have I been told, because that's my story. That's you've got to, I have a process, and not everybody's going to want to come on that journey, and not everybody's going to care, but I do. And that kid in Topeka, Kansas, who maybe is a member of a very evangelical family, who's being told that being fey or being Swiss or quote unquote squishy or liking things that are quote unquote gay, now has a way to have somebody to see a Flamey Grant because of the internet, because they hate that they can't control that. They go out of their way actually to bump off these artists. Like if you go number one and you start charting on iTunes, they will go on and buy every album from every other Christian that they could possibly do it. And they try to get you off of there as quick as they can. They try to get you off that chart because they hate that they can't control it. They hate it. But that's what this comes down to: hate and intolerance. And I want to show people that there are people in those spaces where you don't think they exist. We exist everywhere. And that's
I never would have
practice.
Would not have put those two together until I'd heard about that.
Yeah,
and that's what it's amazing.
LGBTQ people in pro wrestling, where were they until we went and we broke that down? Until because when I started making this, I was hard pressed to find people, and now we cut to today, and there's about 1,500 out wrestlers around the world actively working.
One of my Better Half's favorites in AEW is Nyla Rose.
Nyla is awesome.
Amazing Twitter game, by the way. What a great Twitter game.
Twitter game. If you're not following Nyla Rose on Twitter, and even if you're not a wrestling fan, she's a lunatic in the best possible way.
Yeah.
She's the best possible way. Nyla actually, one night on her Twitch channel, and her Twitch game is great too when she uses it. She decided to eat weird food. Weird foods, do weird food combos like onions and peanut butter and bacon or something stupid like that, or and then Mars bar and marinara sauce and just weird things, and all she did was just sit there and eat stupid foods, and then regretted it the next day because they said, "Oh my god, that was hilarious." She was, "Yeah, I'm farting it up like no tomorrow," and just started tweeting that, but her gas problem all day. It was great. And her in this ongoing feud with Serpentico, where they hate each other so much. So funny. She's just a crazy woman. I love her.
My
Love her. You don't even know these
wife
people.
is constantly like reading me some of her tweets.
Insane. And in the best possible way. I love her. Nyla's a fun wrestler too. She's so fun. You know, I mean, and an icon. I mean, nobody can take it away that Nyla Rose was the first trans woman to win a world championship.
Exactly.
Major wrestler. They will never be able to take that away from her. They'll never be able to take it away that Anthony Bowens was the first out gay male to win a world tag team championship in a major wrestling.
I'm such a major fan of Anthony Bowens, by the way. Like, that's
awesome. I like that guy a lot. That AC Mack was the first out world champion for a major wrestling company with IWTV, the IWTV world champion. And I know that might not be WWE or that, but that was a recognized brand that was considered a world title, and he was the first one. He was the first one there out. And so there's a lot of stuff there. And, you know, and again, I want to turn a lens on it and show people, hey, guess what? We're here. People are there. These people are there. And you can, and there's nothing wrong with loving the people in your life and befriending people in life who are part of this community. We need you too. We need allies like you, Aaron. We need allies like everybody who's on there. That stuff's needed. But in order to be a good ally, you've got, you know, my job is to be a good ambassador for this community, is to tell people, is to show people where we are, everywhere. In spaces where we've been told we're not welcome, we're not out there. And if I can do that in a cool way, like looking at wrestling, by making a film like Boutique, and being able to talk about the importance of why Wakefield Pool and Buddies are key and important, and how Vinegar Syndrome is and Severin and Altered Innocence and you know, Fun City Editions and Arrow are a part of helping this stuff, then I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to use those things to elevate everything. I want to make sure that that happens. I want to make sure that happens. And Boutique was my way of being able to shine a little light on some of that, to talk about why it's important for women to be part of the discussion in the academia space and the film space, and why it's important to see trans people like Mark Caden and Liz Purcell doing amazing work in restoring adult film and cinema, and Casey Scott, you know. Weird thing that's happened to me in the last couple of days is I've been having a lot of a lot of email and DM exchanges with Jeff Stryker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about possibly helping Jeff get something off the ground about his life.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah, he totally fascinating guy. A guy who is an absolute Renaissance man, who's a Shakespearean trained actor, who's done a lot of theater. He's a writer. He's so interesting. He's so interesting. And, you know, I mean, and this is what it, you know, this is why, you know, we do what we do. This is why any filmmaker does it. This is what documentary is important to do. And we all have our own space. You know, I want to see more Indigenous voices. I want to see more work from marginalized countries. You know, I mean, right now in Argentina, they are in a huge crisis right now where they have no funding now for the film agency. It's been cut. What's going to happen to that work? Who's helping restore and protect that work? You know, look at the Brazilian Film Archive. There was a fire in the there was a film fire in the lab there in the Brazilian Film Archive. Thousands of films were burned to the ground, negatives in that lab. You know, I mean, we don't even know where stuff has disappeared. And that's why we need, that's where this restoration stuff is there. And if I can just be a little part of that and be able to incorporate my nerddom, my fandom for film and cinema, and infuse it with a little bit of activism,
Stick it in there.
I'm going to do it. You're damn right to do it, and we all should, and kudos to every one of you who are buying Blu-rays right now and buying 4Ks and collecting prints and RCA video discs and old, out of print DVDs and VHS tapes. Kudos to all of you, because if there ever comes a time where there's a film that you loved and nobody can find it, maybe you are the one who has the only final piece of history there. Maybe you have that source. You have that. You have that physical piece there. Somebody might need that. Look at that VHS tape from Friday the 13th, right? From Friday the 13th Part 2. Some guy at home had a VHS tape, and the only footage that existed from Friday 2, from all those cuts, was that tape. Look at the guy who has the VHS tape of all the New Blood death. All those kills in the Beekler film. That's the only existing footage of that. Think about that. You could be that person. You could be that person. You now own that. You may have, because you recorded it on TV, the only existing footage of maybe some movie that's gone now.
There's so many. I'm a soap opera fan.
Yeah.
And so much of that is, it's lost.
Think about how much of that is lost now. Those soap operas are lost. Think about when wrestling footage. I'm going to jump back to wrestling. Remember, they used to film wrestling on those tapes, right? And they would film tapes, and they record the tapes, and they broadcast them. And a lot of those territories would use the tape again from Tuesday's show for Friday's show, and they would tape over it with what they recorded it, and they would erase it. Portland Wrestling is a really good example of this. Buddy Rose, Playboy Buddy Rose, was an icon in the Portland wrestling scene, and was known in WWE and AWA. Buddy Rose was one of the early believers in VHS and bought a VHS machine. And he so loved watching himself wrestle that every show that came on, he taped it. Portland was one of those territories that recorded over their tapes. Buddy Rose had every tape of every show from the Portland wrestling when he died. Imagine that. That's you as a collector. That $50 Blu-ray you buy might be the only thing that exists at some point. Imagine that. Imagine that. You are an archivist if you collect films. You are a preservationist, and you're doing amazing, amazing work. And, obviously the guys who run those labels are doing it even more. And that's why I made Boutique. And I'm excited to tell you it's finished. It's mixed. And we can't announce it, but the film's going to have a major world premiere this summer at a major festival internationally. It's already booked.
You gotta come. You gotta do the Morocco Film Festival.
Would love to go to Marrakesh. Amazing. I'd love to go to Marrakesh. No, we've got a huge premiere slated for summer. We can't say where, but I can tell you that it's that if you're a genre film fan, you'll be real happy.
That whets the appetite. I am so honored to have you on here, by the way.
Thank you, my friend.
And I do want to have you back on again some other time.
Yeah, I'd love to just geek out more about movies.
because this is like, we geeked out for about a half hour before this interview started, and I just like you're an amazing talker, so I can just like sit. Easiest interviews that I have to do when I be able to sit back and just let people talk, especially when they can engage the camera, which you can. So many fascinating stories. Um, can you say the continent, man? He said, I don't think he said anything about it.
Can't say anything, but
I'm not that's the curator. I don't know. I think
well,
anybody.
curating and archiving kind of go hand in hand there.
And truly, I mean, it truly does. And I couldn't put it any better than you did right there. So I'm going to say I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank Roy for coming in and being utterly fascinating. The stories from your childhood, the people that you've met, the stuff that you're working on, and for those that have not seen it, right there is the link right now for Boutique, which I know
Any
we all want to see.
support for either one of those, for Song Silenced and Boutique, is greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
We just launched some crowdfunding there for Song Silenced. Now there is also a fiscal sponsor page as well for that. There's a link in that Go Get Funding page. If you scroll to the bottom of the bio on the film and the Go Get Funding, should you wish to contribute more and want to get a tax receipt, you can do it through their option as well. And we still have, of course, the Boutique page is set up with our fiscal sponsor. It's part of the way we get our movies done. We try to stay out of dealing with government bureaucracy and waiting around for people to be gatekeepers and tell us what to make. So my amazing producer, Cheryl Storlakis, who has produced a number of awards. She's Emmy nominated for a documentary called Toxic Beauty, but she's also produced amazing genre films like The Night Watchman and The Night for IFC, the Iranian genre film. And so Cheryl is this amazing woman. James Carson, my editor producer, is an accomplished classical pianist, a virtuoso, and he's also an editing maniac and great and just incredible and awesome. And then we have another duo of exec producers, the Butler brothers, who are Canadian indie genre filmmakers who also are saying we don't need the government to tell us how to make our movies, and if we wait around and wait for them to give us a grant, we're never going to make anything. And so crowdfunding is part of it. Fiscal sponsorship is another way that we get to raise money, because there's an incentive there. If you have that extra little bit of money, a tax receipt is a very nice thing to have on your end of your specifically if you're American, with the fiscal sponsorship on your when the IRS comes to calling. It's nice to have a little write-off and way to do it. I mean, it's and then the other thing we do is we do service exchanges with other producers. The Butler brothers do our color and sound in exchange for I do their PR, because that's my day job, is doing film marketing and PR and consulting and working with a slew of great clients. And I got a great list of people I get to work with over the years, from Frederick Wiseman to Julie Taymor to Frank Henenlotter and Bill Plimpton, and Henenlotter, I get to call Henenlotter one of my best friends.
I'm so jealous. I love Henenlotter so much.
How cool is that? How freaking cool is that? I can go, I know I can go over to I can call him and give him a house. I mean, I'm kind of blessed. I worked my butt off. It's never been easy. Probably picked the stupidest art form to get into, because it couldn't be more expensive. A person who draws can draw on a piece of paper. It's not going to cost you. It's not going to cost you, hundreds and thousands of dollars to make movies. Whereas movies, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
When the passion's there, man. When the passion's there.
Yeah, I mean, I get to have dinner with Ken Russell and befriend Ken Russell. How cool is that?
The Devils, man. We need an unrated The Devils.
Masterpiece. How cool is that? I got to have dinner with. I get to have dinner with him. I get to hang out with him a lot in the last year of his life. and his lovely wife Lacey. You know, I wouldn't trade it. I really wouldn't. And as bad as my days can get, fighting through to doing what I'm doing, then I add it all up and I'm like, I'm friends with Fred Wiseman. Yeah, I do keep up with Lacey, Natty. She's doing well. She's doing well. Yeah, I love her a lot. She's a great lady. And you know, I just like having cool people in my life. You know, you're cool too, Aaron. Man, you're cool. I get you in my life, man.
That's what I was about to say. Like, I get to hang out with somebody that hangs out with all these people and has just such an amazing mind when it comes to this stuff too. To even like think to do like Out in the Ring or Boutique or Song Silence, just it.
It's amazing. An idea pops in. I mean, the other project we've got that I'm shooting right now is called Covered Up, the History of Queer Pulp Fiction, which looks at the legacy and the history and importance of queer dime store paperback novels from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Those little 10-cent paperbacks that were basically behind those garishly drawn, kind of dubious LGBTQ covers were stories of love, longing, history, and in some cases, the only way that artists like Armistead Maupin and James Baldwin could get publishing in their early parts of their careers in North America or around the world. They were often published on those dime stores. And so many of those authors, you know, whether it's a housewife like Anne Bannon, a closeted housewife, a closeted lesbian housewife like Anne Bannon writing the Bebo Brinker books, from her home before she eventually would come out years later. And to know that those books influenced Lily Tomlin when she was coming out, and that she would go on to produce a play based on those paperback dime store novels. That Dr. Susan Stryker, this amazing trans academic, would do this beautiful book that she wrote about the history of the art, and that being able to hang out with Maitland McDonough for that too, who was the reason why I made it. When Out in the Ring was playing at Fantasia, I geeked out because Maitland McDonough was there. And I'm such a huge Maitland McDonough fan. It's like, is that Maitland McDonough? And then she goes, oh, my hobby is I collect gay paperback novels.
Really?
And she does that. So we went to her apartment, and which is full of like ephemera and tchotchkes and genre stuff and Argento images and weird things she found on the streets, like part of an old headstone from an 18th century graveyard, you know, stuff like that, or a skull that she found on the side of the road that was made out of of solid ivory. Weird things that she'd find. And she opened up this wooden trunk, like a treasure chest trunk, loaded with 500 to 600 of these paperback novels from the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's like the Choco Trunks, like Mr. Jessup's Choco Trunk.
Yeah, it's the pickle trunk. We even asked her to read a passage from a particularly saucy book called Tangier 66969. And it is hilarious to hear her say this stuff. So we're going to go and interview the few living authors from the 1960s who are now in their late 80s and early 90s, and talk to other people like Lily Tomlin and that about why those books were a lifeline for so many people. You know, because you could tear the cover off of a book, right? You could hide that under your pillow,
yeah,
or under your bed. It's not like a dirty magazine where there's images, right? Those are just words. But in those words is LGBTQ history. And it's art too. Those those book covers get blown up, and they do amazing ones. Oh yeah, like the Other Sex, or these crazy, weird, lascivious, naughty books. But for so many people, that was their only access to queer history and stories of love and longing and representation. So that's the one we've filmed a few things now, and we're going to hopefully have that. That should be finished by November, December.
Let's get all these on physical media, guys, because that's what you want. You want a nice collection from Out in the Ring to Boutique to Song Silence to the latest one. You want to get like a nice little collection of these documentaries, which I so want.
Yeah, it's you really got to do that. I mean, I implore everybody to buy books, buy physical books, buy anything you can. I love having a collection. Tori Potenza and she says in her film, she says, I just love having stuff, having a collection. And then I realized how important it is to have that. Because if something ever happened, if something went away, that might be the only copy left.
I'm a Doctor Who fan. I know all about the pain of losing something that's not going to come back anymore.
Oh yeah, no, I mean absolutely. I mean how devastating to think that art like that. I mean, we hear all of these tragic stories. I mean, that's why why does everybody get excited when you hear that something like Napoleon from the early 1900s is found and restored? Why? It's just a movie. And the scary thing is celluloid. You think about how new film is. It's 125 years old only. Maybe a little more, maybe 100, less than 150 years old. It's a pretty new medium, cinema, if you think about it. And the fact that even from the 90s, there's films missing. They can't find the negative for Gas Food Lodging.
Really?
They can't find it. Yeah. There's another Nancy Savoca film that they can't find the negative for now. My friend Robinson DeVore made a beautiful doc. Well, my friend Adam produced a beautiful doc with Robinson DeVore. I shouldn't say this. I reverse that. My friend Adam Sekuler is an amazing filmmaker in his own right. Produced this doc for Robinson DeVore, but Robinson DeVore made a film called Zoo, which was a doc that was shot on 35 mil. That was about men who liked to get intimate with horses, and it was a documentary. So disturbing topic, but elegantly, beautifully made and done classily, and an exploration of a really weird topic. That film was made in 2010, if I'm correct. And Think Film can't find the negative. It's missing. We don't know where the prints are.
In 2010.
And that's 14 years. 15 years. We're already losing stuff. And we're seeing it now with Netflix. Where are all those things that were on there? Where's all those series and those made for Netflix movies, right? That never had
never got a physical release, man.
They disappear. They're disappearing. And Netflix has no skin in the game. They don't care. They don't care about physical media, right? Because they don't make their money.
No, it's next. It's what's coming up or what's right now. They don't care about
people are negotiating the rights, trying to negotiate with them on rights. How do we get the rights? I mean, so much great work. Oh, Dogfight. That's the one that they couldn't find. Matty K just said Dogfight's coming out from Criterion. They couldn't find the negative. And the Gantz, the Abel Gantz as well, and Napoleon, as I said. These, to think about that, they went missing like that. It's just terrifying to me. It's terrifying to me that, we're losing part of this history, in this cinema history. And, again, it's just, why we need why physical needs to exist.
Yeah. If something as big as Killers of the Flower Moon can't get a physical release, think of the smaller films.
If Scorsese can't convince a North American company to release his Academy Award nominated film, I know Killers. Yeah, no, it's going to get a French Blu-ray release, but no North American release.
I'll definitely grab it. Next time in Paris, I'm grabbing that, man.
Yeah, it's going to get a French release, but there's no interest from anybody, from Apple or any of those North American people, from releasing it. It terrifies me that Scorsese. So, I mean, how long did we wait to get The Irishman?
Yeah, luckily for hopefully Criterion can rescue Killers of the Flower Moon.
Coda. There's no release of Coda in North America. It's the one Best Picture. How in the hell is the Best Picture winner not from 2 years ago not get a release on physical in North America?
That it blows my mind because when you think about all the these big films that you're mentioning that haven't got a release, and there's all these other films, these films that may have came on Netflix or one of the other streaming services and just disappeared off there, like
Yeah,
smaller ones, ones
I,
that people
I
don't
totally,
remember.
I totally know why Severin and Vinegar Syndrome won't release those because they're devoted to rescuing films that are shot on celluloid, and that's
Which
their
makes
mission.
sense.
And
Yeah,
that's why they have the partner labels, because the partner labels are the ones that are picking up those, the mantle and the other areas. They're the ones rescuing where my doc, were out in the ring, could have been sitting at home on my shelf in a hard drive. And now I have this beautiful Blu-ray with gorgeous artwork that they did, and as I was able to include, 5 or 6 interview segments, and Brad and I were able to edit those together as like extras on there. I mean, I don't think they did justice to what kind of extras are on that Blu-ray, because there's 5 interview segments that have never been released. So there's about 25-30 minutes interview stuff on there.
and
Uh,
you actually have a movie that has a famous Vinegar Syndrome slip, like the Vinegar Syndrome slip cover.
Cover, yeah. Oh, listen, so my friend Wes Hurley is an amazing collector, by the way, and also a Blu-ray nut, and we lament to talk about the fact that we're, if we're I don't know why we spend so much money the way we do it, and why we do it. Well, I know why we do it, because we're lunatics. But he made a film called Potato Dreams of America, which came out through Dark Star, and he got a slipcover. And he said it was the happiest day of his life because the company that he buys all of his movies from was putting him out with a slipcover. And I love, and Wes is great. I have him in boutique, and we talk. He brought we shot it in my Airbnb basement in Seattle when I went there, and he brought his original theatrical poster for Bloody Birthday, and we put it behind him there, and he's just sitting.
Bloody birthday, man! I love that movie.
Get ready for the Seattle trip when I take the tour of Casa Weird with Lisa Petrucci.
I I'm a fan of a lot of the '90s, late '90s, mid '90s, like kind of erotic thrillers,
Yeah.
and so many of those are just. I'm scared that they're going to get lost, or because they just don't seem. Nobody seems to be like picking up on them at this point. And it was like my youth, as I was younger, as my 20s. I remember like sitting back and like just like renting all these and like, being fascinated and like becoming a massive Andrew Stevens fan because he did all this stuff. And as I thought, like company like Vinegar Syndrome, okay, so this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get like body chemistry. I'm going to get like the surrogate, which tend to is first. And no, it's just not out there. And it just amazes me the stuff that
It's finding suitable elements.
yeah.
Like everybody goes like, there's a long list of it. I mean, you think of it. I mean, look at the passing. I mean, they had to create that from so many different. Well, Death Warmed Up. How many prints they had to find from different countries to get us
Yeah.
to the uncut version? They had to go to they had like 5 prints. They had to this one had 2 minutes, 2 minutes more than that one did, and this one has
Worth it.
more than that one. And that's how they did it. That's really how they did it. And finding these elements, I can't even tell you the stuff that I saw that I know that Vinegar Syndrome is going to be releasing, that I know that they can't find the extras for. That you can't find a negative that's usable, or you can't find the elements. And they like to shoot, and they like to use from the negative. They like to use from the original element, the best element possible, unless they have no choice. But and so when you're often lamenting, and this is something I have to tell collectors, don't lament that I can't believe they're releasing that piece of crap and they're not releasing this other film. Well, think about it. Maybe nothing of use exists. To make it good. I know of another title that I can't even say, that Altered Innocence. The filmmaker didn't know where his negative was. A very early 90s Eastern European bloc trans film. And somehow they found in an archive for a sales agent or something that went out of business, they found the negative that they thought was lost 30 years ago. They found the negative. And now the and now the sales agents and the producers and that don't want to restore it. They won't let them do it. So understanding what Vinegar Syndrome, how deeply passionate Vinegar Syndrome and Severin and Arrow and Umbrella also amazing.
Oh my god,
Part
the
of
stuff they're releasing.
part of the
Yes.
company, part of the stuff they do. And again, and wonder why they don't release everything. And always remember that these companies, like Vinegar, well, it's in their name. They're devoted to film elements. So that's why if you're like, oh, I can't believe they're not going to release this straight video film or this shot on HD film. Well, it's not their mandate. That's why you have other labels that do all that stuff. That's why you have ETR. That's why you have Altered Innocence. That's why you have Saturn's Core. That's why you have Yellow Veil. That's why you have all those partner labels. And that's why you have MVD, Synapse. I love Don May. I love what Don May's done. I mean, look at, Don May's responsible for the restorations of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Night of the Living Dead.
Synapse stuff is incredible. They start with laser discs.
Don is a lunatic in the best possible way, because he will sit and work on something and obsess over one film for years. I mean, the work he did on the Kindred is so beautiful. Massacre at Central High, come on.
My god, that was amazing watching that print when I got this.
God, look at how beautiful that movie's never looked that good ever. I mean, look at the shitty VHS copies we saw.
Curtains was a shocker for me. I was a massive fan of Curtains, and I'd seen so many dodgy
copies. Unfortunately, that Curtains was Dawn went down to Toronto to find the negative, and they had a list of all of the elements and everything that was cut out of Curtains, and they were supposed to have 3/4-inch tapes, and they went down to the lab. They went to go pick everything up, and everything was still in the file. Everything was still in the file and listed, and then when they got there, they had thrown out all of the extras and trimmings and all of the uncut stuff from Curtains.
Oh, no.
It was destroyed.
That's heartbreaking.
It was listed in their archive as existing, so it did exist, but it's gone now. All the gore.
There's so many horror stories like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's so common. I mean, how that I'm excited to see how the Funeral Home disc looks when that comes out, because I'm Leslie Donaldson, and also a friend of mine is in Boutique, and I talked to Leslie a lot about it, and she's like she's seen a career renaissance in a little bit, is in the convention circuit because of the fact that all her movies are being released. My friend Lisa Langlois, who is also in Boutique,
Canadian Scream Queen.
Both Leslie.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm friends with both of them, and that's why I asked them to be in it, because I wanted them to talk about how these releases have helped them as actresses. They found a new audience. Happy Birthday to Me, Curtains, Deadly Eyes.
I used to look for movies with both those actresses specifically because I was a massive fan of both.
Lisa, class of 1984, The Nest, Minefield, even stuff like that. And now they're going to put out like all these other movies. The Joy of Sex is apparently coming out, somebody said. There's all these movies coming out. I've heard rumors that that's coming. I've heard, I know that there are other ones. I've heard all of these things. Aquino's putting out, was it The Man Who Wasn't There with Gutenberg, and Lisa's in that.
That's right, though. I forgot that she was in that.
She's the female lead.
It's been so long since I've seen that film. But Gutenberg had that time when he was the man, right? When he was everything.
Yeah,
Gutenberg was like
that. So if you think about that, I mean, that's another part of this boutique thing, is like how many people have found a new way to make money. you know, because we know how Hollywood is. You age out, right? And if you're a woman, so now these ladies, these amazingly talented women, are able to monetize, you know, are able to monetize stuff. You
Which
know,
is fantastic because that convention circuit is out there too, and it's so like look at the girls from Evil Dead. Like years you didn't realize it was a big thing, and all of a sudden they're doing the circuit, and like oh my god, people actually care about this film.
well, because people like that's why people collect. They like an autograph, they like an interaction, they like that, and I mean, I think Happy Birthday to Me is due for a new re-release or new reissue soon. I mean,
I love
there's
that.
another I love Happy Birthday to Me. But I would love to see that get get reevaluated and redone. I'm waiting for my Strange Brew.
I love Strange Brew. I love the Mackenzie
Brew.
brother.
I mean, can you imagine that when the 4K UHD of Strange Brew comes, which it should? I'm so excited. I have my laundry list. I know what I want. I want Strange Brew. I want Jim Cotta.
Oh yes, thank you. I love Jim Cotta.
Cotta on Blu-ray. I really want all that great canon stuff. I'd want the Ladies Club. I want Red Blooded American Girl. I want Gleaming the Cube.
Oh yes, I used to have that VHS. I'm a skateboard.
I know. It's just like I want those are my movies between those are those films, right? So there's so much stuff. There's an endless stream of stuff from around the world, and and great work. I mean, Sam is Sam Deegan's. She's doing a book on Category 3 films that she's going to be doing.
That is what Malcolm's gonna love because me and him are.
She's gonna.
Yeah,
because I know what a big Ebola syndrome fan you are. So.
Oh yeah, that's. It's so hard being an epileptic watching the Ebola syndrome.
Or Dr. Lamb. The disc of Dr. Lamb. The Untold Story 2. All that stuff. I want to really. I need another re-release on Robotrix. To be honest.
There are so many out there. I
Skin strippers.
I love when you Happy Birthday to Me. When I was a kid, they had in the newspaper. They used to have in the back of the paper. They'd have all the ads for the films. So when there was a cool poster, I had this scrapbook, and this is I was a big film fan. Even as a kid, I would cut out the poster out of the newspaper, and I'd get some tape and some glue, and I'd put it in there. So I had this around 5 or 6 different Happy Birthday to Me.
Oh God, yeah. Somewhere in this mess of my apartment is an original theatrical poster for Happy Birthday to Me. I wish I could find it because I mean, and they're all and a lot. All those people are still pretty much around, and I see them in Toronto. Like Lisa's still around, and Leslie and Mark. Jack Blum.
Is Eisner?
Huh? What did Eisner do?
Yeah, he's. I remember more both names, so I hope I got this right. The actor, he was a massive Canadian actor.
Siege. Yeah, Siege.
Yeah, because it's so amazing to see some of these people because there's a lot of them. I grew up at CBC, and there's watching stuff like Hanging In and King of Kensington, and seeing things, all these shows which should be on DVD or Blu-ray and sadly aren't. How you see a lot of these actors kind of cycle through.
Oh yeah. Oh God, there's so much great stuff out there. There's stuff, there's just a plethora of things, that it can be released now. I mean, I was so thrilled when Siege came out. Siege is such a weird little movie too.
Done in where I just came from, where I lived before here. Actually, I lived in
Halifax. Yeah, Salter Street, produced by Salter Street Films, who produced
which amazes me, by the way.
This hour and 22 minutes, right?
Yeah, so every time I hear the name.
I mean, it's it's just really, it's a very cool, it's a cool cool situation to always unearth these things. And as I said, I talked to, when I talked to Sam said, Sam and I were talking about, just imagine the world that everybody's going to discover when they discover all this great sub-Saharan African film, or Vietnamese cinema from those countries, when the world opens up to showcase some of those territories, when more of that the amazing Filipino film stuff finally comes out. I mean, we're seeing some of it now. All those Eddie Romero action movies.
Oh yeah.
The fact that Cain and Abel, I don't know if you own it. It is so good. Connie put that out. It's Lino Broja, who's the kind of patron saint master of Filipino cinema. Connie did such a good job with that. I mean, Connie put out a film that I worked on, that I did a theatrical release on, called Sell Out. That's a Malaysian corporate satire karaoke musical.
Oh really?
A hoot. And it's so much fun. I saw it. It played at Locarno, and then I saw it in Vancouver, and then I picked it up for theatrical release in Canada and did a limited run. We had like a sell, and they were able to bring it to Blu-ray. Because I wasn't going to be able to do it. I didn't have the capacity to do it, nor was I willing to do it anymore, and they did. And
I love
so,
that Scorsese World Cinema Project, which I'm absolutely so grateful for. I'm married to a Moroccan,
yeah,
and one of the first things that he put out was a movie called Trances. It's a
yeah,
documentary,
yeah.
and it is fascinating. But it's like fusion style music that and this band, that's Moroccan band that he actually fell in love with, because he's a Scorsese comes here a lot.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually part of the guys behind the Marrakesh Film Festival. He's
Yeah.
one of the main guys. So when I got to see that experience through the eyes of my better half, and she got to kind of experience it through my eyes, seeing this for the first time, it's amazing, like, to think of all this. And this is like some of the bigger stuff. And but when you think like the Eddie Romero stuff, that's getting rescued, and all this stuff you see like that comes up from like Mondo Macabro and companies like that.
Pete Toombs. Oh yeah, man. Oh, I love all that stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. So much great stuff. I mean, you think about that. I mean, I remember watching Queen of Black Magic, or Black Magic Terror, with Susanna, the Indonesian, possession movie, where he rips off, where she makes the guy rip off his head and it goes around biting people. And I remember watching it on VHS when I was a VHS bootlegger. James Balkowski, the guy, who was like he was like the cool dude who worked at the video store, and he runs Shock Stock. And we all tape traded together, with me and Chris Gore and all those people in the 90s. And I remember finding that it was a company called Lettuce, Lettuce, Entertain You Video, and they
Oh,
put a
really?
terrible movie out called Queen of Black Magic, but it is glorious. It's glorious Indonesian horror genre stuff, and I'm so thrilled. Even the Indo stuff that the Vinegar Syndrome just put out, the Sante films, I believe they're called. So great. I'm so excited to see that.
All of the Vinegar Syndrome is going into world cinema now more so than we've ever seen them before. It's
Joe's passion is restoration. That's so understand that everything he's doing is based on the ability to restore and protect. I mean, I'm talking about this guy's got the blue cases that are a certain type of plastic that protects the negatives and the prints, and then he's got that brilliant Oscar, who's his restoration guy. And Oscar comes from the finest of salt, because he worked for for the Kodak place, Sante. Thank you. Sante. The Sante films are coming out. Come on, I mean, like, how exciting is that? I have no interest in owning a copy of Demon Rat, but I know a lot of people do. Really happy to it. I'm so happy it exists. I've watched it. I don't love it. So And I'm not going to own it, probably. Well, I shouldn't say that, because if an opportunity goes to buy it, I'll probably buy it. But like, I mean, how did I not know that Infernal Rapist existed?
Yeah, I know. It seems like
Horrifying title that
me
is.
too, actually.
So, but I had to buy a movie. I was like, I have to own a movie called Infernal Rapist. I have to own that. Just on sheer title alone, I need to own that. I needed to own Ebola Syndrome because I'd already seen it and I love it. I know you hate it, but I had to own that. You know, I had to own
See,
it.
the thing is, I didn't get rid of it, and I thought about it. I'm like, one of these days, Malcolm's going to make me watch it again, and I'm going to have to rediscover.
Has your wife seen it?
No, that's not one of the ones she's seen. No, she watches a lot of Vinegar Syndrome, though. She
Oh, she does. No,
surprises me
I
with like some
just
stuff.
would love to see what she thinks of Ebola Syndrome. My dream would be that she watches it and says it's one of the greatest cinematic experiences she's ever had. Just because I just loved it. I would love it to be a polar opposite.
She loved Dr. Jekyll's Dungeon to death. So that kind of blew my mind.
Dr. Jekyll's Dungeon of Death. Okay. That is a glorious train wreck. That is a glorious egomaniacal. Again, it's like Champagne and Bullets bad. Like, it's just some guy's arrogance.
But he takes himself so seriously. Like he's like he's Shakespeare with these stuff.
So goddamn fascinating. I love that film. It's just like, how do you not love this?
So
how
many
do you
people
not
saw
love
it.
it for this arrogant jerk making a movie like this? Like, I mean, it's the most arrogant, self-absorbed movie. And it's glorious in every way.
And they get like some of those. That one's gone out of print, hasn't got re-released anywhere, I don't think either. That's
never again. No, I remember. I didn't realize I'd seen it on VHS. I think probably in the 90s. Because that was the best part about the crappy video stores, right, or the smaller independent video stores.
Yeah.
Is they just went over to like whatever bargain basement place and just bought 5,000, 10,000 tapes just to fill the shelves and didn't even know it was there. How do you think I found Rudy Ray Moore? It's like my buddy James when James Balkowski, the guy who runs Shockstock, and who was my tape trading pal. He was the overnight manager at the Jumbo Video. I went to high school in London, and I used to go and hang out because James was the cool guy in the rock and roll band playing bass, and he had long blonde hair, and he was cool. Who coincidentally ended up getting my mom's job after she left Video One. He took my mom's job. But he was like the coolest dude because he was in a rock band, and we hung out, and we loved movies. And we went one night, and we'd just go and we'd pull stuff on the overnight shift. He'd come in at 11, he'd work till 7 a.m. And we'd just watch all this garbage. And then what quote unquote perceived as garbage. And then we found a Xenon video copy of Xenon Entertainment copy of the Human Tornado. Not even the original Dolomite. Like Human Tornado, which is in its own hilarious because it's got that opening credit sequence where it's just him in the cape and the movie's just on the title.
Oh man,
those movies are glorious. Those Rudy Ray Moore movies are so good. That's how we found Big Meat Eater with Big Miller.
Oh, I love that film when he starts it with that. Here's the man walking down the street.
Crime Wave. John Pai's Crime Wave, which is executive produced by Sam Raimi.
I found Pets. Vinegar Syndrome put out Pets. My mom owned a video store, owned a corner store, and we got a bunch of videos in. No covers on any of them. So I had to watch every one of them and write descriptions for people that were going to rent them. Yes. And I come along Pets, and Pets is like, I get fascinated with this like insane film.
Pets is weird, isn't it? I love it. Pets is fun. There's so much weird stuff out there. It's so great when you find that weird movie that you don't know why it existed. I remember even like when Hong Kong film was like really blowing up in the 90s. Now we were getting into like John Woo movies. Like Better Tomorrow was coming out, and and obviously The Killer was breaking up, and now everybody to see Hong Kong movies because what's going on in Hong Kong, and then Category 3, and then all of that stuff. I remember. There was a New Saigon Video, and basically it was a Vietnamese video store, but they had all Cat 3 movies dubbed in Vietnamese, right? Well, I didn't know the difference because I don't speak Chinese and I don't speak Vietnamese. So I didn't care. All I knew is that they were letterboxed VHS copies, and I could buy copies from them for like $5. And they had a bootlegging thing in the back. You can buy like $5 or $10, you'd buy these VHS tapes of these bootleg movies. And I remember finding stuff like and I'm looking for the stuff that I wanted to be the one to discover something, because that was the cool thing, is like if you were going to find that new discovery that nobody knew. And this is also part of it, right? I remember a movie called Skin Stripress, where all she does is rip the skin off people's backs. It's just the cheesiest movie, but it's hilarious. Or like a Chinese ghost story with a hopping around, or Mr. Vampire.
Oh, I remember that.
I remember Robo Tricks was like the craziest, weirdest, like girl cyborg rape revenge movie. It's like bizarre. Then I remember my first experience watching the story of Ricky, or Ricky O.
Oh yeah,
Ricky O. I mean, where's my 4K UHD of that, buggers? Come on.
I had that on VCD actually originally, not even on DVD, on VCD.
VCD. I mean, I still go and find those. I loved that movie. But I remember there's a movie by Shunji Iwai, a master Japanese filmmaker, called Love Letter. And it's this gorgeous, gorgeous film. And New Line was going to they bought the rights, the remake rights. And they were going to make it with Meg Ryan in the female lead role. Oh. And it was the idea that, it's kind of like a lost love letter comes back, and this love letter tells about this lost, relationship. And the film has disappeared. We don't know where it is, because New Line had the rights, and we don't know where any of it is now. Couldn't find it. My friends loved it. There was a print. The sales agent had it. Played the film festival in Cleveland all the time. It was one of the most beloved movies they ever showed at the festival. I couldn't find it. Everybody said, "Oh, I wish we could find this kind of movie." I go to Chinatown in downtown Toronto, and they're selling bootleg DVD copies of Love. Cranking them out. I loved going to Chinatown. That was my favorite thing when I lived in London in high school. I knew that the school trip was going to be me getting to go to the big city, and I was going to go to Chinatown, and I was going to ditch my class, and I was going to go find bootleg VHS tapes of Hong Kong Category 3 movies. That's all I wanted to do. And then I wanted to go to Suspect Video. I wanted to hang out at Suspect Video, because I knew about Suspect Video, and that was when like guys like Colin Geddes, who was the Midnight Madness programmer, worked there and stuff, and all those guys. It's where I met. I wish I could find it. I have a photo of me meeting Dario Argento at Suspect Video. It was the year that Stendhal Syndrome came out, and
which I love, by the way.
Love, and I couldn't. I don't. I look like such. I look like such a loser. Like I look like the guy who lives in his mom's basement and will never accomplish anything. I'm wearing a Flipper t-shirt, and I have this like bad like equivalent of like a George Clooney like that Caesar cut, and I look like such a nerd. It's so awful. And he's like leaning over me, lording this big, tall, Italian, lanky guy, and this nerdy, geeky kid in his like Flipper, Paul Hogan Flipper t-shirt that he got from a mom's video giveaway. And I'm like, look like such a loser, but I can't find that photo. That's so funny though.
I'm so jealous. Argento, man. That's my guy right there.
I mean, I'm pretty good about keeping a lot of photos of things that I have. Like I couldn't find, there was a photo. I have my one photo of me with Ken Russell, and I try to keep, a copy of every photo. I have lots of Tura, which is great. And I have a lovely photo with me and Kitten. But, there's a few people that, I don't. I mean, obviously, I can still meet Dario Argento at some point. But I did lose my photos of me with Coffin Joe.
Oh.
When I
set, by the way, that arrow set looks amazing.
Oh, yeah, I'm dying for that Coffin Joe. I mean, again, it's something with video, man.
Yeah.
Coffin Joe, But I'll tell you, it's we could talk for hours, but
yeah,
I think we should though, because I should probably eat some dinner.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much again. It's a pleasure, and I want to have you on again. Guys, thank you so much, everybody that came in, everybody that commented. Uh, but again,
I
right there.
contribute if you can. Grab out in the ring. I'm really proud of that film. I can't wait for the world to see Boutique next and see Song Silence this fall. And then anything you can. We've any assistance is helpful. We greatly appreciate any support that can come our way. As I said, we Song Silence. I mean, we have pledges from $5 up to $3,500. But every dollar counts on any of these things, because the truth is that in order to make movies without the interruption and involvement of bureaucracy and a bunch of uninformed gatekeepers at these companies, we have to do it differently, and that's why people have gone that way. We've gone that route. It's not easy. It's harder than I think people even realize. It's a full-time job to crowdfund. If you set up a crowdfund, especially if you do one of these all or nothing ones, and you've only got 30 days to raise it, I will never do that. I'd rather have something than nothing. But the all or nothing ones, can you imagine? I mean, my friend crowdfunded twice on her movie and hit her goal. But it actually ended up almost killing her. She ended up having a health breakdown because
I can imagine the pressure of that.
Because it's so stressful. Because now you have to raise that. If you don't get it, if you don't raise that 50,000, and you raise 30, can you imagine if you raised, you're trying to raise 50,000 and you need $4,200 and you raise 42,000 and you're trying to raise 50 and you lose it?
Yeah, because you don't hit that goal.
Because you didn't hit the goal. I mean, that's and some people now have gotten to the point where they do keep they do have a side hustle and an amount of money aside just in case they can't hit a goal. Because they can
still, guys, like to the
money.
And honestly, if you want to keep it going, try to keep
but you just don't want to lose it. You've got to, so they do that, but that's why I do it differently. I'd rather raise smaller amounts through different ways and stuff, and Song Silence, we're going to be doing a lot more with that campaign because we've got an extensive we got a great crowdfunding video, and we're going to be launching that on Instagram and pushing that more, and on TikTok, and we've got images and photos and stuff, so it's I'm excited to keep pushing these movies out. So any assistance, and look forward to coming back on with you, buddy.
100%. Have a great lunch. But thank you guys so much for coming in. I want to thank Ry. And this has been amazingly fascinating. I was very nervous about this one. I'm not going to lie. But have a wonderful day, guys. Make sure you check out the links as I've been putting them there throughout. Make sure you're grabbing your copy of It in the Ring, which is out right now on the Vinegar Syndrome partner levels from ETR Media. Check out the crowdfunding and boutique. Everybody here that's watching this video is going to want to have that film. Song Silence amazes me, and I think there's so many people that are going to be fascinated just to see, just from the stories that you've told and things that's out there. It's incredible. Well, again, thanks for joining me, Ry, and
they do it.
Everybody, have an amazing night.